Thank you so much, gentlemen, for accepting our invitation to be part of this dynamic team this afternoon. So without wasting much time, we will dive straight away to our discussion. So our discussion this afternoon, our program this afternoon is going to, first of all, we'll have a panel discussion with our 4 panelists. Then we'll have a question and answer session, and then we'll wrap up the events by 3:30. Thank you. So first of all, I would like to start with Dr. Jean-Cédric Kouam. OK. So, donc, selon une déclaration conjointe de l'OIT, de la FAO et du FIDA et de l'OMS, des dizaines de millions de personnes risquent de tomber dans l'extrême pauvreté, tandis que le nombre de personnes sous-alimentées, actuellement qui est estimé à près de 69 millions, pourra augmenter jusqu'à 132 millions d'ici 2021. Que pensez-vous par rapport à ceci, Dr. Kouam?
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Vera, pour cette question. La réponse à cette question nécessite au préalable d'identifier tout d'abord les facteurs qui expliquent la faim ou alors l'insécurité alimentaire dans les pays d'Afrique subsaharienne, dans notre pays. Beaucoup de travaux s'accordent sur le fait que l'insécurité alimentaire dans cette région du monde est d'abord et surtout un problème de croissance économique, d'instabilité politique, de production agricole, d'infrastructures d'accompagnement des agriculteurs, aussi problème de mauvaise gouvernance est lié à la forte croissance démographique, sans oublier les inégalités de revenus et un problème d'éducation nutritionnelle des jeunes. Vous êtes d'accord avec moi que le Cameroun fait face à ces difficultés que nous venons d'énumérer, qui sont à la fois conjoncturelles et structurelles, économiques, sociales, démocratiques, voire politiques. Nous avons illustré notre propos par le problème qui aujourd'hui affecte toutes les économies, c'est celui de la crise. La crise sanitaire due à la propagation du nouveau coronavirus. Cette crise s'est traduite par la fermeture des frontières afin de limiter la propagation de la maladie. La fermeture des frontières a eu pour corollaire la baisse de l'activité économique, donc la baisse des importations. Notre économie importe des produits qu'elle consomme. Et aussi la rareté des produits de consommation sur les marchés, la hausse des prix des biens et des services, le panier de la ménagère devenant plus cher. Le 15 décembre 2020, le ministre de l'Agriculture et du Développement rural a rendu public une analyse, les résultats d'une analyse, l'analyse du cadre d'identification des zones à risque et des populations en insécurité alimentaire et nutritionnelle au Cameroun. Cette analyse a été menée conjointement par le FAO et le Programme alimentaire mondial, le PAM. Cette analyse de l'impact de la COVID-19 révèle que la pandémie a constitué un frein à la production d'environ 42% des actifs agricoles, occasionné une augmentation des pertes post-récolte, provoqué la raréfaction des denrées alimentaires de base et a créé l'enrichissement des prix d'achat de 3% par rapport à la situation mondiale.
Okay, I think we lost Dr. Kouam there. Thank you so much, Dr. Kouam. We hope you join us later in our conversation. Now, I'd like to find out from Dr. Asangwa Constantine, who is working in the health domain. Now, with the coming of the COVID, the government of Cameroon, Dr. Kouam, I'm going to come back to you, please. Sorry. So with the advent of COVID, the government of Cameroon actually proposed and took some measures ranging from shutting down our borders to wearing a face mask, compulsory putting on a face mask. Schools were at some points even shut down. So what I want to find out from you is, we have observed now that the use of all these face masks, physical distancing, and hand washing procedures are not being respected any longer in our country, even though the COVID pandemic is still on the rise. In this, is this a right time for our country or for our citizens to relax such measures? And if not, what can be done to ensure that these measures are being fully respected by all Cameroonians? Over to you, Dr. Constantine. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Vera, for the questions. Yeah, as we all know, at the heart of the pandemic, and the government did its best and is still doing its best to contain this pandemic. Since the first case was discovered in March last year, a lot of measures have been taken by the government. Now we know about the national response plan that the Prime Minister, on behalf of the head of government, pronounced to the population. And the population has been doing its best to respect uh, those preventive measures enshrined in the plan. However, for some time now, as you've rightly said, there's been an observation that most of these preventive measures, especially putting on face masks, maintaining social distances, and washing of hands, has been relaxed. Many people have abandoned that practice. And here, the reason is simple. The first thing we need to focus on in addressing this is to understand why this sudden change in behavior. And the first thing we would like to draw our attention to is the prominence of public perceptions about this pandemic. Since the emergence of this pandemic, there have been a lot of public perceptions, which some are both negative, some are positive, regarding the pandemic. People have various beliefs influenced by the media and people of the community about what this pandemic is, its origin, and its spread. We watched how it started in China and moved to other parts of the world and finally came to Cameroon. And one of the challenges the government has faced is to get the population to respect these measures. And now that these measures are not being respected, the reason is clear. People's perceptions influence their behavior. That's the first thing. If people are abandoning putting on the face mask, washing their hands and maintaining social distances, is a belief that people think that the pandemic is no longer there on the one hand. If it is there, it is not serious. The death toll has dropped. I mean, if that is what you should go to the streets, people will tell you. So this issue of negative perceptions have greatly influenced the way people behave about the disease and to respect the preventive measures. We also have misconceptions and misinformation still from the media. There's a lot of information going on the social media that influence the way people understand the presence of this virus. And therefore, when people heed to those type of information, it really influences their behavior. There is also the implementation aspect of it. You know, we always have the challenge of implementing policies. We have good policies, and when it comes to implementation, there are challenges in the process. When it started, if you follow what went in other countries, there were tougher measures to contain the spread of the disease. You see, we found in different countries where people were arrested, people were beaten. Although those measures were harsh, we never experienced that. I mean, I think one of the sanctions that was levied for somebody who will not put on a mask was to pay a fine. But even at that, many Cameroonians still went down the streets without putting on face mask. So you find even law enforcement officers who are supposed to cause the population respect those measures, they themselves, they hang their mask on their chin. So you see, there was that relaxation and that weakness on the part of the implementation. And as I say, the policemen, they are not different. They are part of Cameroonians, I mean, which falls within the confines of the perceptions that is going on. I mean, we've heard generally that from global statistics, Africa is the least affected. And so if people think that they are not dying, if people think that the death toll is so minimal in Africa, they go about it, they go about their daily lives as normal. Then secondly, we knew about the relaxation of the easing of the restrictions that came up at the middle half of last year. That also influenced people's behaviors in responding to these preventive measures. So these are some of the reasons why people tend out to abandon the preventive measures that the government enshrined in the national response plans, of which as we speak, as of the date of today, the 22nd of January, registered, according to data coming from the Ministry of Public Health, there are 28,010 cases that have been recorded, 26,861 have recovered, and we've had close to 455,000 deaths. It means it's being said over the radio every day, coronavirus is still present in us, and we still need to continue to maintain the preventive measures that have been given. So looking at this behavior, there are some measures that can be taken. We need to still continue to educate the population. It's very, very important. The population has to be educated, because if they don't get the right information, the social media will give them the information which is not congruent to scientific evidence. And then we also need tighter measures, stricter measures. For example, making the wearing of face mask mandatory in certain public places. For example, the Junior African tournament is going on in Cameroon, and as you must have watched, people don't go to the stadium. You cannot enter the stadium without a face mask. If that was imposed and respected in other public places, people will have to follow that. If you're going to a shop that you need to buy, for example, you cannot do without what you're looking for. So you need to put on the mask. And also, the sanctions has to be stepped up. I mean, there should be tougher sanctions. You know, it's important to control behavior. You need sanctions for people to change their behavior from what they are doing to what is healthy for them. So I think we need to think about sanctioning them. And then one thing also we need to do is to build public trust in government policy decisions, because one of the reasons why people are abandoning these preventive measures is the lack of trust in the information that they get from government. I mean, if you ask people's opinion, what the information that comes from the national media and even other private medias, you say they don't trust what's being said. And there are a lot of things that people say contrary to that. So with that perceptions in mind, it's difficult to deconstruct these beliefs, and therefore it influence people to be behaving negatively. That is abandoning the key preventive measures, which are putting on the face mask, washing your hands, and maintaining social distances. So it's on this note, I think these are some of the reasons why people are not still respecting the preventive measures. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Dr. Constantine. I go with you with the point that tighter and stricter measures should be put in place. When the COVID pandemic just started, if we watched what happened in other countries around Africa, especially countries like Rwanda, we realized that their own measures were tighter. The first few days when the Rwandan government came up with their restrictions, we could see Rwandans being seriously beaten for not respecting government-imposed measures. So I think as Cameroonians, or as if the government can equally borrow from such societies, then that will go a long way to make Cameroonians to respect some, or if not all, these measures that the government is painstakingly putting in place to make sure that we have a healthy environment and economy. So I think measures should be stricter and tighter, and Cameroonians also, we should join the government in the government's efforts to make sure that we respect and keep some of these measures, not only in public places. In the market, now the churn is going on. Very few people, even when they say people should put on their mask, yes, you put on the mask and you gain entry into the stadium. What happens inside? We've watched some matches with people not putting on their mask, no social distancing is being respected, and all of that. So starting from the law enforcement officers to we, the lay citizens, I think we need to educate ourselves on the ills of the pandemic and to make sure that we go with with the measures imposed by the government. We'll stay on the health domain and the food security domain. And I'll turn my mic now to Dr. Jean-Cedric again, so that he tells us a little about the food security sector, which has been greatly touched, because during the pandemic, very few farmers had the courage to go to their farms because transportation was a very big issue, and just the fear of you leaving your house to start jumping from one cab to the other equally helped in discouraging some of our farmers. Okay, Dr. Mudieu, est-ce que vous m'écoutez, s'il vous plaît?
Oui, oui.
OK. Je demandais que pour assurer une gouvernance démocratique, tout en répondant à cette pandémie du COVID-19, il faut faire preuve au leadership, l'adaptabilité et l'innovation. Comment la réponse à la pandémie a-t-elle affecté la gouvernance en Afrique et au Cameroun en particulier? Merci.
Merci, docteur Vera, de me repasser la parole à nouveau pour apporter quelques éclaircies sur l'impact de la COVID sur la gouvernance. Et d'entrée du jeu, je tiens à préciser que la question du Covid, c'est une question, c'est vrai, c'est une question sanitaire, mais c'est également une question transversale, parce que la crise qui s'est produite a affecté d'autres secteurs économiques et fondamentalement politiques. Et si je le dis ainsi, c'est pour essayer de montrer comment est-ce que, vu d'un certain angle politique, au moins du point de vue de la gouvernance, la crise sanitaire va jouer un rôle fondamental, non seulement parce qu'elle va mettre en évidence un certain nombre de fragilités sociales, notamment la fragilité de l'État. La fragilité de l'État en Afrique et particulièrement ailleurs. Et puis, aussi d'un autre point de vue, elle va exacerber un certain nombre de crises qui étaient sous-jacentes et puis redynamiser, opérer des mutations au sein des rapports sociaux, au moins en termes de régulation sociale. Et quand je parle de crise, l'État, on va se rendre compte que quand le Covid a commencé, il y a un certain nombre de restrictions qui ont été mises en place par le gouvernement. Et auquel des restrictions, nous avons la fermeture des bars à partir de, il me semble, c'est 18 heures. Il y avait un certain nombre de restrictions, notamment l'interdiction des manifestations de plus de 50 personnes. S'il faut voir de ce point de vue, il y a une crise de l'état de droit. Il y a une crise des droits de l'homme, il y a une crise des libertés qui a été manifeste au point affecté par la crise. Puisque l'État voulait, à travers ces mesures, essayer de contenir la crise pour mieux la gérer, il s'est trouvé que l'État a dû appuyer sur, on va dire, déranger pour restreindre ces libertés qui sont fondamentales, notamment dans la Charte africaine des droits de l'homme et des peuples, parmi lesquels la liberté de circulation et la liberté de se mouvoir, liberté associative. Il faut dire même que les églises ont été privées de culte, dont les libertés religieuses ont été également affectées de ce point de vue. Parce que, vu de cet angle également, en rapport avec la Constitution, sur des situations d'urgence, situations d'exception, on va se rendre compte qu'on a comme l'impression que les mesures, notamment de restriction de mouvement, de restriction d'association, de restrictions de culte, ne sont pas différentes, au moins des mesures appliquées dans des états d'exception, dans des états d'urgence, dans des situations de crise particulières. Et dans ces situations de crise, il y a une tendance de l'État d'en abuser sur un certain nombre de droits. La réalité également de cette crise sanitaire sur la gouvernance va se manifester au niveau des frontières, la liberté de circulation, la liberté d'échange, la liberté commerciale sera également affectée de ce point de vue. Et on va également voir que la crise va affecter une réalité tout moins essentielle de l'État, c'est-à-dire l'État westphalien, les frontières. On va se rendre compte qu'avec ça, il y a une exacerbation des nationalismes, c'est-à-dire des mesures protectionnistes, la fermeture des frontières, le contrôle des frontières, la restriction de certains mouvements, la restriction d'entrée de certaines marchandises sur en fait une catégorie d'entrée, puisqu'ici il y a restriction de mouvement, il y a forcément restriction d'un certain nombre de produits. Donc, de ce point de vue, il y aura une exacerbation des formes de nationalisme due aussi au fait que les États ne sont pas prêts, tout moins prêts à accepter un certain nombre de choses. Je vais parler de l'intégration régionale, puisque la réalité est conséquente. S'il y a fermeture aux frontières, il y aura également affect au niveau de l'intégration régionale. Parce que l'un des aspects de l'intégration régionale, c'est la circulation d'un pays à un autre sans restriction. De ce point de vue, l'intégration régionale en Afrique sera fortement affectée, je vais dire freinée par la crise sanitaire. Mais la crise sanitaire ira plus loin pour affecter les situations de gouvernance à des échelons de décision supérieurs. Je veux parler de la crise du multilatéralisme. Pourquoi je parle de la crise du multilatéralisme? Nous avons vu, elle existe. Je ne veux même pas dire qu'elle a fait naître, mais elle existe. Mais c'est moi que la crise sanitaire a dû renforcer, a dû mettre en évidence ce qui était sous-jacent. Nous voyons le cas de l'OMS. Quand l'OMS, la gestion de la crise et les dissensions qui en sont survenues entre, par exemple, les États-Unis d'un côté, les États-Unis et les pays européens d'un côté, et la Chine et d'autres acteurs de la société civile, des dissensions autour de la gestion de la crise qui a poussé les États-Unis à quitter l'OMS. Mais cette distinction, l'OMS n'est qu'une, je vais dire, une configuration, une réalité, je vais dire, micrologique de ce qui se vit dans les autres instances onusiennes, c'est-à-dire de cette crise du multilatéralisme. Il y a également que la crise sanitaire a affecté un certain nombre de valeurs sociales. Il y a une crise de valeurs qui est conséquente à cette crise sanitaire. Nous l'avons vu, notamment la façon de se saluer. Vous savez qu'en Afrique, nous sommes habitués aux accolades. En Afrique, nous sommes habitués aux salutations. Nous ne sommes pas habitués à certaines ambassades, à certaines façons de saluer, comme ça se fait par exemple au Japon. Parce que cette réalité de saluer à distance, c'est une réalité japonaise. Mais avec la crise sanitaire, il y a un certain nombre de valeurs qui ont été modifiées, notamment la salutation. Et puis, avec ça, vous savez qu'en Afrique, par exemple, on peut aller chez un frère, on peut aller chez une sœur je vais dire, sans annoncer. Et puis, on est bien reçu. Mais avec la crise sanitaire, il y a eu cette restriction, il y a eu ce recul, il y a eu cette peur, non seulement cette peur d'être affecté, mais cette peur d'affecter. Donc, la crise sanitaire a affecté non seulement nos façons de faire, mais aussi la crise sanitaire a, il faut le dire, aussi son côté jardin. Et le côté jardin de la crise sanitaire, c'est que la crise sanitaire a mis en évidence la centralité de la digitalisation dans les processus institutionnels. Quand je parle de processus institutionnels, je parle notamment des processus décisionnels, je parle notamment des processus d'implémentation. On va voir qu'avec la crise sanitaire, même les modes de gouvernance même les modes de prise de décision ont été modifiés. Je vais parler, par exemple, des réunions de coordination qui se faisaient via Skype, via Zoom, pour certains dans les ministères à travers des vidéoconférences. Je vais parler également de la digitalisation qui a également été mise en évidence dans les systèmes, notamment éducatifs. Hein. Aujourd'hui, on s'est rendu compte que la digitalisation ou bien les vidéoconférences et l'enseignement via vidéoconférence sont essentiels parce qu'avec la crise sanitaire, il y a un certain bousculement, il y a un certain déclassement des pratiques éducatives. Notamment, je vais parler des mi-temps qu'on observe. Quand ça a commencé, il y a une suspension de cours. Les enfants étaient obligés d'aller à la maison et à partir de la maison, on pouvait suivre les cours via des tablettes pour ceux qui peuvent. Mais aussi, la crise sanitaire, de ce point de vue, a exacerbé, pour moi, ça a mis en évidence des inégalités. Parce que combien de parents, combien d'enfants peuvent s'octroyer ce droit d'avoir une tablette, d'avoir un laptop à la maison. La crise sanitaire, pour chuter de là, la crise sanitaire a engendré une reprogrammation, une réadaptation de l'État. L'État a été obligé de s'adapter à nouveau pour essayer de faire face à la crise sanitaire et à ses conséquences. Quand je parle d'adaptation, je parle des modes de gouvernance. Aujourd'hui, quand je parle de fragilité de l'État, c'est que l'État ne pouvait pas répondre de façon efficiente aux préoccupations, aux besoins de la population. On s'est rendu compte qu'avec la crise sanitaire, il y a une distance entre l'État et la société. Avec la crise sanitaire, cette distance est fondamentalement creusée au point où l'État ne pouvait en faire seul. Aujourd'hui, avec la crise sanitaire, l'État a dû faire appel à la société, je vais parler de la société civile, se mettre ensemble, pouvoir décider ensemble. Voilà un peu ce que je peux dire d'entrée de jeu et certainement, au cours des échanges, nous aurons la possibilité d'en savoir et d'en discuter pour mieux éclairer les uns et les autres. Je vous remercie.
Okay. Thank you so much, Dr. Muzio, for that insightful clarification on the governance section of our economy. Mr. Francis, we're happy to have you back. Okay, I see Dr. Kwam is connected. Yeah, you're welcome. So I would like us to stay back since Dr. Kwam has just joined us. I would like Dr. Kwam to intervene on our food and food security sector. So Dr. Kwam, before you went off, we're trying to find out from you that the pandemic has equally affected the agricultural sector of our economy. Farmers were scared, leaving their houses to go to farm, etc., etc. So my question to you was that la pandémie a aussi provoqué la fermeture des frontières, comme disait Dr. Sangwa et aussi Dr. Moutieu. Les restrictions commerciales et les mesures de confinement ont empêché les agriculteurs d'aller au champ et cultiver leurs produits. Ça a aussi empêché les agriculteurs d'amener leurs marchandises au marché. Ça a empêché aussi l'entrée de l'achat et la vente des produits agricoles. Tout ça là, ça a tout perturbé l'accès, ça a réduit l'accès à ces régimes alimentaires. Quelles sont les implications de cette situation et que devrait faire le gouvernement camerounais dans cette situation?
Ok, merci beaucoup, Dr. Vera, merci beaucoup. Avant de répondre à cette question, il convient déjà de rappeler les déterminants de la sécurité alimentaire parce que c'est un aspect qui est un élément qui est très important et qu'il faut bien préciser. Parmi les déterminants de l'insécurité alimentaire dans les pays, quand on essaie d'identifier les facteurs qui expliquent la faim ou alors l'insécurité alimentaire dans les pays d'Afrique subsaharienne, plusieurs auteurs s'accordent sur le fait que l'insécurité alimentaire dans cette région du monde est un problème qui est lié déjà à leur croissance économique, aux instabilités politiques ou bien sociopolitiques, aux infrastructures d'accompagnement des agriculteurs qui généralement ne sont pas de bonne qualité, aux problèmes de mauvaise gouvernance. Les problèmes d'insécurité alimentaire ou bien de famine sont également liés à la forte croissance démographique de la population, aux inégalités de revenus et aussi un problème d'éducation nutritionnelle. Donc, voilà quelques problèmes qui peuvent expliquer l'insécurité alimentaire dans les pays d'Afrique subsaharienne, dont le Cameroun. Et vous convenez que notre pays fait face à une crise. Outre le fait que nous sommes frappés par la crise liée au coronavirus, nous faisons également face depuis 2016 à une crise sécuritaire. Et cette crise sécuritaire a également impacté les chaînes d'approvisionnement. Nous faisons face aux inondations dans la région de l'extrême nord et ces inondations affectent les chaînes d'approvisionnement et suscitent la famine dans le pays. Et voilà quelques problèmes qui peuvent être énumérés qui sont liés à la situation sociopolitique et aussi à la situation sécuritaire. À ces problèmes-là s'ajoute donc le problème qui est lié au coronavirus. Parmi les mesures qui sont prises par les États pour faire face à la pandémie, il y a eu la fermeture des frontières. Et qui parle de fermeture de frontières parle de la baisse des importations, sachant que notre pays importe l'essentiel de ce qu'elle consomme, parce que nous ne transformons, et même le riz, nous importons. Donc, la situation liée à la COVID-19 est davantage exacerbée donc, par, comme je disais tantôt, la crise sociopolitique. Et il convient de trouver des solutions efficaces pour réduire l'insuffisance ou l'insécurité alimentaire. Comme vous dites bien, le gouvernement a pris une série de mesures pour stopper la propagation de la maladie. Et ces mesures, dont la fermeture des frontières a impacté donc, la distribution des denrées. Une des conséquences immédiates aussi de la circulation de la crise, de la fermeture des frontières, c'est la mobilité dont le docteur Moujo parlait tantôt, parce que, vous savez, beaucoup de marchandises passent par la route. Et les frontières étant fermées, beaucoup plus dans la zone CIMAC, les frontières étant fermées, il y a la nourriture qui ne pouvait plus quitter d'une région à une autre, ou bien d'un pays à un autre. C'est devenu très, très compliqué. Et la baisse donc de la production qui résulte également de la crise à demande constante, c'est-à-dire il y a la demande qui n'a pas bougé. Les prix ont également été impactés. Et la hausse des prix a un impact sur le panier de la ménagère, ce qui fait donc que les ménages qui vont au marché ne peuvent plus s'offrir ce qu'ils veulent. Et la conséquence directe, c'est la famine. Donc, soulignons que notre économie, comme je disais tantôt, est extravertie, c'est-à-dire que l'essentiel de notre production locale est exportée. Et nous bénéficions également de ces revenus d'exportation-là. Et si les revenus d'exportation, les recettes d'exportation ne sont pas à la hauteur des dépenses que l'État a planifiées, ça a un impact également sur le fonctionnement de l'économie. Donc, la fermeture des frontières n'a pas pour conséquence la famine seulement, mais la fermeture des frontières a également des conséquences sur la baisse des recettes budgétaires. Cependant, les dépenses publiques n'ont pas baissé. Les dépenses publiques se sont alourdies en raison de la prise en charge des maladies COVID. Les dépenses publiques se sont alourdies en raison de la prévention de la maladie. Pourquoi? Parce que dans la plupart des services, il faut acheter les gels hydroalcooliques, il faut acheter les masques et les dépenses sont alourdies dans ce sens aussi. Il ne faut pas oublier que nous sommes dans un processus de reconstruction dans les régions du nord-ouest et du sud-ouest et les dépenses de sécurité également qui, dues à la crise de Boko Haram dans la région du nord, sans oublier les grands chantiers. Donc, voilà les dépenses qui ont fait que ça alourdit, mais les recettes ont baissé. Et cette situation a donc pour conséquence donc, le creusement du déficit budgétaire. Donc, les États ont fait face au déficit budgétaire et vous savez, les seuls moyens de financer le déficit budgétaire, c'est soit contracter un emprunt, soit alors prélever des impôts nouveaux. Mais la baisse de l'activité économique qui est liée à la fermeture des frontières, par exemple, ne permet pas aux entreprises de se mouvoir comme elles veulent. Elles ne peuvent donc plus payer les impôts et même pour sauver les entreprises, l'État a pris une série de mesures fiscales pour essayer de les sauver. Donc, il y a le déficit budgétaire et la seule façon de financer donc ce déficit budgétaire, c'est de contracter un emprunt. Voilà, donc le gouvernement camerounais a fait face à ce challenge. Il y a le déficit qui est davantage là, le déficit budgétaire. Il y a la dette publique qui s'alourdit. Et il y a les chaînes d'approvisionnement même qui sont pratiquement bloquées, les recettes d'exportation qui ont chuté. Il faut donc prendre une série de mesures pour essayer de remonter la pente. Je vous remercie.
Ok, merci beaucoup, Dr. Moudieu. Cette intervention ça m'a bien marqué et ça ouvre une autre porte. So I was saying, despite the broad political support and hopes for United Nations, Secretary General Antonio Guterres' global ceasefire initiative, the COVID-19 pandemic has been accompanied by the continuation of political violence across conflict-affected countries, especially our country, Cameroon, with the insecurity in the Northwest and Southwest regions, not leaving out the North. So how has this pandemic affected the ongoing political crisis in the Northwest and Southwest regions, in particular of our country, Cameroon? Mr. Tazucha, the mic is yours. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Moderator, once again. Welcome, panelists and listeners. As others have said, the pandemic took the world unawares and has left untold damages to humanity and has halted developmental strides and approaches to conflict resolution and peace-building efforts across communities in the world. Every facet of life has been affected. It was because of that, on Monday, 23rd March 2020, the United Nations Chief Scribe, Antonio Guterres, called on warring parties across the world, including Cameroon, to pull back from hostilities, put aside mistrust and animosity, and silence the guns, stop artillery, and end airstrikes. According to the UN Scribe, this is to help create corridors for life-saving aid, to open precious windows for diplomacy, to bring hope to places among the most vulnerable to COVID-19. Equally inspired by the new rapprochement and dialogue between combatants to enable them joint approaches to push back the disease, COVID-19. The Secretary General said once more there was a need for people to think that they were human beings and stop fighting and come together like, not like foes, but like friends to fight the common enemy. And what is this common enemy? The common enemy was is the pandemic. He equally said to end the sickness of war and fight the disease is ravaging the world. He appealed that we should not fight among ourselves because the common enemy is already there. But as he said that, many countries, especially Cameroon, actually did not hit through. We quite remember that Cameroon is, we're looking from Cameroon legal landscape. Cameroon and the Cameroon Constitution contains the traditional fundamental rights, freedoms, and protection. This includes the right to life, liberty, and security of all persons. Despite the appeal, Cameroon did not hit to the core. Maybe not only Cameroon, some other countries as well did not hit to the core of the United Nations Scribe. That they should silence their guns. They should have a ceasefire so we can fight the common enemy. We should also understand that under the Cameroonian Constitution, international law retains primacy over national laws, which means that if the country or if Cameroon had ratified international laws, those international laws supersede or overrides the laws that we have in Cameroon. Therefore, if we are part of these laws and we ratify them, we are party to them. Whatever is said according to the law, we must respect them. It is notable that Cameroon is contracting state party to a number of international and regional human rights laws and humanitarian laws that are relevant for purposes of human rights abuses considered in this aspect. Because if Cameroon could not listen to the United Nations scribe and did not stop the war and follow up with the pandemic that was ravaging Cameroon, because at that moment, Cameroon actually was top, was the first in Central African and West Africa with a number of people suffering from this pandemic. And yet they concentrated more on trying to fight a war which all or everybody or some people believe is an unjust war. And if they did that, and they should remember that the African Charter of Human Rights and People's Rights which they ratified in 1989, the Convention Against Torture and Other Cruel, Inhuman, Degrading Treatment and or Punishment that they also equally ratified in 1986, and many more other conventions that they ratified, actually is giving the Cameroon a bad name at that particular moment. And as such, they tried to muster courage, take advantage that the world was actually diverted from looking at what was happening in Cameroon onto the pandemic. They took the opportunity and continued the war unabated. And believing that the military, on the one hand, attacked, or the separatists attacked, there was always bound to be a defense. So that actually made the war continued despite the appeal, which was actually not good for the face of Cameroon at the international dimension. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you so much, Mr. Francis, for that insightful discussion. We'll stay back on the health domain with Dr. Sangwa. And Doc, we want to find out from you, vaccines need so many years of research and testing before they're being approved to be used by citizens. Well, we realize that with the COVID-19 pandemic, it has taken a very short time for researchers to come up with the vaccine, which is already being used in countries like the US, the UK, and some parts of Europe. Even though Africa, especially Cameroon, we are still not actually using the vaccines for obvious fear of what the consequence or the effect is going to be on our health. So in your view, what accounts for this speedy and rapid research on the COVID vaccine? I know in Cameroon, we are prone to malaria, and up till now, we haven't had a malaria vaccine. But COVID just came yesterday, and in just above, a little above a year, researchers have come up with a vaccine that is already being used in some parts of the world. So what can be a possible explanation to this, Dr. Constantine? Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was just saying, yeah, the issue of the vaccine is really a burning issue. And generally, vaccine takes at least 2 years to be manufactured. But as you've rightly said, the case of COVID-19, or the COVID-19 vaccine has been different. And what I can say in relation to this is the fact that the vaccine is serving as some sort of a rapid response. This is a problem, a public health problem of global significance that's taking away so many lives. Yeah, there are protocols for coming up with the vaccine, but something can still be done in the midst of the difficulties that people are going through to be able to save the lives of people. I think if we look at the vaccines that have been manufactured and approved so far, like the BioNTech and Pfizer vaccine and Moderna, these vaccines have been approved by high income countries, the US, the UK, I mean, these big superpowers. And it's not something that somebody can just come up and just try to convince the population out there to say this is a vaccine and it is ready, and they'll just get it and start using it. I mean, there are protocols for vaccine production, which I believe these vaccines, the production process of these vaccines have respected. So something needed to be done. It's the same thing that happens with Ebola in the DRC Congo, where the vaccines were also manufactured to be able to save the lives of the population. So if we look at the common steps in the manufacturing of a vaccine, there are basically 3 phases where a trial is being commissioned, a randomized controlled trial with few volunteers, in which the vaccine is slotted into them, and then they find out the reaction of the vaccines. After that stage, it moves to stage 2, where a bigger population is invited to volunteer to participate in that trial, to be able to dictate more, and the population that participates in this second phase has a broader characteristics that needs to be taken into consideration, like the age, the sex, and the geographical regions. So this step was followed in the production of these two vaccines. And then the last part, the last stage, which is still an RCT that requires a huge population, it was also followed. So in essence, there is evidence that this vaccine followed the international standards that are recommended for the production of vaccines. They have been subjected to checks by international regulatory authorities to find out if the manufacturers respected the standards and the regulations enforced. Now, the vaccines, as you've rightly mentioned, is being administered in the UK, in the European Union, and in the US. It is difficult now to start talking about the limitation of the vaccine, but from the trials and the tests that have been carried out, it is saving lives and it's helping people. So what is to be done is when vaccines are rolled out, they are being monitored. Yes, it's better to take the vaccine and you follow up if there are consequences, if there are side effects, that could be addressed. So the fact that the COVID-19 vaccine has taken a very short time doesn't rule out its effectiveness and its safety. Normally there are traditional procedures, but there are situations where you need to act. Action is needed to save life, and this has been ethically backed.
Okay.
So these vaccines have been rolled out, and people are getting it. There are a number of side effects here and there, which is normal for every vaccine procedures, but it is being addressed and monitored. So I don't think it's a big issue. There have been a lot of controversy surrounding that, and people have criticized it for being too hasty to say there is no evidence about the efficacy. But I read a paper today published in the Lancet where the results of the first phase of the trial was published, and it was very promising with a 95% protection against this virus. I mean, the evidence is very strong on that, and therefore that is why these vaccines have been approved and they're currently saving lives. If you look at the challenge that this pandemic has brought on the populations worldwide, it is very difficult to go on without this vaccine. And they couldn't have waited up to 15 years, as some people are suggesting, to be able to come out with a vaccine. What will happen to, if you look at the pace at which people were dying out there, I think it would have been a disaster. Now it's helping lives. Now what is required is to continue to monitor closely the efficacy and any other side effects or any other problems that may come up as the vaccines are being rolled out. So there's no reason to be afraid. If you're afraid, you need to, you have to choose it. For example, if it was about your life, about life, saving lives. So people, the vaccine is important to be taken. So what I can say in summary is that the COVID vaccine, it has come so early or too fast, let me put it that way, but I say it's a rapid response measure to address the situation on the ground, given the scale and the magnitude of the impact that the virus was inflicting on the population. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Doc. And this brings us to the end of our first half of the panel discussion. So I'm going to open up the floor now for some questions and answers, for the question and answer session. And dear colleagues, if you have any question, please kindly raise your hand, or you drop your question in the chat box, and I'm going to read it out to the panelists in question. Chers collègues, on passe maintenant à la phase de questions et réponses. Soyez précis quand vous posez vos questions. Merci beaucoup. So the floor is open, colleagues, for questions and answer. So again, a reminder of our topic. This afternoon, we're talking on COVID-19, the then, the now, and the after. So if you have any question for our panelists, don't hesitate to drop them in the chat box, or you raise your hand and unmute yourself. Then you can go ahead to ask your question. Thank you.
Yes, I do.
Okay, Henry, you can go on.
I would like the panelists to talk about how COVID-19 has affected civil liberties and whether this was justified, because we closed hospitals, we closed churches, schools, etc. So is it necessary for the government to curtail civil liberties in order to protect the mass population? I have another question concerning the vaccines.
Please, Harry, there is some echo in your background. I don't know what's happening. So it's difficult for me to get you. I don't know if the panelists got you, but there is some echo.
Is this better?
No, it's getting worse.
Oh God. No, I'm just going to leave my I'm going to leave the question.
Please, can you just drop the question in the chat box, please? Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I think that will work better.
Au début de la pandémie, il y a beaucoup de statistiques qui prévoyaient l'hécatombe pour le continent africain. On disait que d'ici 6 mois, si l'Afrique ne prend pas les précautions, ce sera la catastrophe totale avec la pandémie du Covid-19. Nous sommes 1 an après, mais en termes de statistiques, je pense que les continents européens et américains ont enregistré le plus de cas et le plus de décès jusqu'à aujourd'hui. L'Afrique, il y a une pensée globale qui estime que l'homme noir a des prédispositions naturelles à résister au virus du Covid. Je voudrais savoir, par exemple, ce que Dr. Constantin Assangwa pense de cette théorie. Est-ce qu'il est vrai que la race noire, si je peux dire ça comme ça, que le continent africain a des prédispositions naturelles à résister au conflit? Qu'est-ce qui explique que notre continent ait le moins de cas enregistrés jusqu'ici? Et peut-être que d'une manière ou d'une autre, ça participe à ce que les individus ne prennent plus les précautions nécessaires. Au début également, on a combattu l'utilisation de la médecine traditionnelle. Les plantes étaient combattues par les médecins et n'étaient pas conseillées par les médecins. Aujourd'hui, les mêmes médecins, c'est vrai qu'ils ne le disent pas à Mondovision, mais ils conseillent quand même l'utilisation de certaines plantes naturelles. Qu'est-ce qu'il en est exactement? Je pense que Dr. Assango est mieux placé pour répondre à cette question sur la santé. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Betty. Over to you, Doc. Do we have a natural resistance against COVID as opposed to the white-colored skin people?
Yeah, thank you very much for that question. When this debate came up, I tried to find out what the evidence say to support this, and basically there was no hard evidence supporting this fact. As we speak, COVID-19 is still new, research is still going on, and it is too early to draw this type of conclusions. The evidence on the ground, you need to carry out this investigation to be able to prove that Africans have natural fortification, you want to put it that way, or immunity vis-a-vis the COVID-19 disease. So I think there's no evidence to support that. People have said that most of the arguments that have been raised have been really speculative, and there's no clear evidence on that. But they've shown some evidence in other diseases, like the what could I say, like TB and I've just, the other ones has gone off my mind. I mean, when they look at, they are just trying to draw from a history of resistance or survival of a global problem, with Africa being an exception when it comes to measuring the consequences. And this is exactly what has happened with COVID. As Betil said, the worst was predicted for Africa at the start of this, but unfortunately, it has turned out to be the other way around. And now the arguments that have been raised are highly anecdotal. Yeah, they are not. There's no strong evidence to support this. I mean, to make this claim, you need to really carry out this study to find out that this is what actually happens. And I'm sure research is going on that. I mean, I saw even grants that they're asking for investigators to find out this. Why is it happening like this? So most of the evidence I can say for now is not very strong to support that claim. That is the first comment I have. The second one on traditional medicine, yeah, it's also another huge debate about traditional medicine. We know what happened with the case of Madagascar and other African countries that they were talking about. And even here in Cameroon, our Archbishop in Douala, who came up with traditional medicine that he strongly argues have cured people with COVID-19, and there were some traces of effectiveness. The thing is, one thing we need to understand is that there's a lot of medicine has a political dimension. I mean, there's a lot of politics in it, and there's a procedure, especially when it comes to traditional medicine. If you look at the history of promoting traditional medicine in global health, there have been a lot of reservations and differing perspectives and so a type of resistance in advocating for that. So there's a politics behind that. Traditional medicine, from the few evidence we had that cured the disease, what was supposed to be done was to investigate the efficacy and safety of this product, rather than just discarding it that it cannot be. So it falls within traditional. When we talk about traditional medicine, we are talking about LMICs, that's low-income countries. We're talking about Africa. And if you want to join your voice to the bigger argument about what is good that comes from Africa, this falls within the same line of thinking. So the strength is there, but there is a scientific procedure to be able to approve that. Yes. So that is what is happening. So if even people are cured, the same like if you come out with any cure for any disease now with your traditional herbs or medicine or plant, it will be difficult to just move and say this is it, and the international community or WHO, for example, just give its approval. Yeah. So there are other issues beyond what we see that we need to also consider that. So that is why it has been very, very difficult to approve the traditional medicine as a cure for COVID. But I think it's a very, very good area for research to go on. And one of the things is that we must not also wait. I don't know in terms of the regulations or the international body that approves, drugs, like the World Health Organization that we have. I don't know whether this. We must always adhere to what they're saying. There is the global actions and there is also the local perspective. If we have something that is local to us or national to us, I don't want to call it local because it's like, it's like looking at it in a biased way.
Okay.
We should be able to test it. If it works for us, yes, let's go ahead and use it. That is it. The key thing is to make sure the side effects are so minimal. Don't take away life. I think that is the essential thing. Yeah, so we need to find out that, and if we are satisfied that that is it, we have national regulatory authorities in the Ministry of Public Health that are capable of doing that. What we need is just to get into work and investigate it, and if it's okay, we approve it at a national level. We must not totally depend on global acceptance before we do something locally. So that's my take on that.
All right, thank you so much, Doc. I'll take one question from the chat box before I come to Wilfred, whose hand is up. Henry is asking, COVID-19 caused the government to curtail civil liberties by banning public gatherings. Was this necessary? Can any of our panelists quickly give us an answer to this? Was it necessary for public gatherings to be curtailed? Okay, I see Mr. Francis. Briefly,
Yes, I think
please.
our attempt to that question.
Yes, please.
We should know that everything has a limit, as one politician once said. Everything has a limit. So too are our civil liberties. You cannot mortgage other people's lives because you want to gain civil liberty. As one we should have to take into consideration. Sometimes in life we also have preferences. I want to find out if we would prefer civil liberties to death. So these are some of the things we should take into consideration. Even if you prefer it, other people may not, because if you go out, mingle yourself with friends, either in bars, in churches, in cinemas, and wherever you are, and you come back to other people who did not go, you will contaminate them. So if you do not value your life, I think the government thought other people would value their lives. That's why they kept us those strict measures to see that we curtail or we mitigate the spread of the pandemic. I remember when we began this our discussion, I think the moderator said it happened in Rwanda, where the government of Rwanda, Paul Kagame, put up very strong and strict measures. And for that reason, you find that they have actually witnessed very limited casualties as far as the pandemic is concerned. So, Mr. Henry Kwam, there is always a need for us to guard against certain things that actually are very much important in our lives. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Francis. Wilfred, your hand is up, please. You can unmute yourself. Kindly unmute yourself and ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Actually, I wanted to give in a contribution with respect to the question raised by, I think, Cynthia, on why there are low COVID cases in Africa. Recently, there's an article that was published on the CAF website by the health team, which outlined some 5 possible reasons that could explain why there are low COVID-19 cases in Africa. The first among that is low testing levels and poor testing strategy in Africa. And if we look at the 8th of November, when the analysis was done for this article, 3 million tests were done in Asia, but in Africa, we had just about 89,000 tests done. So with that level of low testing, you cannot say for sure that there are no cases. So that's the first thing. And then the second hypothesis that is raised in this article is the youthful nature of Africa's population. So if you look at the statistics of COVID, you see that most of the cases or the people who are at risk of getting infected by the disease are people who are somewhere around 60 and above. And Africa's population, you have just about 3.5% of Africa's population that is above 65 years old, compared to 20% in Europe. So when you look at that, then you see that the youthful nature of African populations is one of the hypotheses that kinds of protect Africa's population from the high number of cases. Another thing is the cultural practices that we have in Africa. The fact that aged people are at risk, you have aged people in Europe which are who are being put together in foster homes. And because they are at risk, there's a risk as they are together, there's that risk of a high transmission of the disease amongst them. But in Africa, you don't have, our old people are not kept in foster homes, they are kept within our own homes. So there's a low possibility of transmission among this age group. Then the fourth point that is raised in this article was the imposition of early strict lockdowns in many African countries. Earlier in this debate, in this webinar, we talked about early strict down measures in countries like Rwanda. So these early strict down measures in Africa helped to curb the propagation of the disease in most African countries in the early stages. And then the last reason was raised in this article is the reduced mobility due to the poor road networks in Africa, which is, I will always say that this is one of the times where underdevelopment in Africa has come to Africa's mercy. because of the limited movement of people. We don't have aeroplanes moving from one city to another in most African countries that have to group large number of people together. So it kind of helped Africa somehow to reduce the propagation of the disease. So these are the 5 main things that were raised in this article. So that's my contribution. And then I will move over to my question with your permission.
Please, can you make it 1 minute, because we have less than 4 minutes to wrap up this session.
All right, thank you. So my question says, on the one hand, COVID-19 has devastating effects on other sectors, as we have seen, like the political, the agricultural, the economic, while the health sector at this stage still demands for strict measures. So how do you think, or how do the panelists think we can find a balance in all these different sectors to make people live some kind of a comfortable life?
Okay, thank you. Panelists, the floor is open. Mr. Francis, Dr. Kwan, Dr. Mozio, and Dr. Constantine, anyone with an answer?
Please, can you repeat the question?
Yes, I said on the one hand, COVID has devastating effects on other sectors, as you all have raised, the political, the agricultural, the economic. And the health sector is still demanding for strict measures. So Dr. Constantine was still demanding for strict measures for lockdown measures and more stringent measures to be taken into place. So we see that if these measures are taken in place, then these other sectors will be affected and people's life will be difficult. So I'm asking, how do you think we can find a balance in all these sectors in such a way that people can live a comfortable life while reducing the propagation of the disease?
Je peux parler de la collaboration, je peux parler de la régulation. Quand on parle de gouvernance, c'est premièrement dit que l'État ne peut plus faire tout parce que l'État est limité. Comme je l'ai fait comme j'ai fait le constat dans mon propos liminaire, c'est que cette crise a mis en évidence, tout moins renforcé l'idée selon laquelle l'État en Afrique est fragile et ne peut répondre à lui seul aux préoccupations, aux besoins des populations. Et le secteur de la santé, tout comme les autres secteurs affectés, je pense que la gouvernance est l'un des atouts pour essayer de faire face à cette crise qui frappe partout, tous les secteurs, en associant la société civile, en associant la société civile et l'État, et les populations également, les communautés. Je veux dire, tout le monde doit être impliqué dans les processus de décision, telle enseigne que chacun se sente concerné par ce qui sortira les actes de cette décision, afin de répliquer ou bien de reproduire, bien de pouvoir affecter les communautés dont ils sont responsables. Je pense que c'est ma modeste contribution à cette question. Je vous remercie.
Okay. D'accord, merci beaucoup, Dr. Mozio. I'll take one last question from our chat box, and the question is coming from Maurice Chego. Bonsoir aux experts. Ma question s'adresse au Dr. Constantine. Peut-on dire que les populations ne respectent plus les mesures barrières du fait du relâchement de la communication aussi bien du Dr. Manauda Malaki à travers cette suite sur les nombres de cas contaminés et des cas de décès, mais également des autres médias qui diffusent des images des corps dans les couloirs des morgues, les alarmistes n'ont-elles pas contribué à amener les gens à respecter les mesures barrières? Dr. Constantine?
Okay, thank you very much for that question. Yeah, I think when I began, I was some of the way out to get the population respect the preventive measures. I mean, I was talking about sanctions. I think that is it. That is one of the measures that could be used if people are relaxing in respecting the preventive measures that have been stipulated, it's because of what they feel and what they see. If, for example, I said, according to the statistics, we have currently 455 deaths. This number around the 400, around this number has been telling around for the past 5 months since October. It's been like this. So, and when this statistics are given and people see that people don't die, you know, the main fear in Africa is death and nothing else. If we want to look at people's behaviors, any sickness that does not bring about death, people are reticent in it. So we need stricter measures. When I talk about stricter measures, I talk about sanctions. For example, you pointed the case of Rwanda, but that was an extreme, because normally the human rights issue will come into play. But I mean, there are other subtle ways that you can call for to organize, especially the fines. If the fines are reinforced, I think it will be very, very important. Reinforce and make sure people pay, not just the people who don't put on this mask, for example, entering a shop, but the person who did not check that. I mean, the shop owner should pay a fine. I mean, I think with that, I think in a way, it will cause some people to order. But and at the same time, the economic situation is good, that, as we already say, I mean, it's about trade-offs, right? What are we trading to survive? Is to get a balance I mean, do you hold Cameroon? I mean, stricter measures like the lockdown is good, but at what price for Cameroon? And I think it's exactly what the government was thinking in that lines. So it's about trading off. If we're going about, and what influences us practically is the trend, the statistics, the cases, and I think that's we're working from that. I think that is part of the reason why the relaxation, in my own opinion, on the part of the community members and on the part of law enforcement officers and decision makers, because they see it. I mean, we've seen people who are putting on masks last March till around of last year till around September, and from there till now, we are not seeing them on television with masks. I mean, we're talking about decision makers. So I mean, there is that inner shaping that is happening in people, and that is what is manifesting itself publicly. So that is what I can say.
Okay, thank you so much. I'll take some other contributions and comments from our chat box. This one is from Dr. Gobina. Even in developed countries where vaccination is actively going on, recipients are to some degree selected, in brackets, healthcare workers, aged persons, etc. If we come to Africa with a mostly young population and really low numbers, should vaccination be as aggressively promoted as in the Western world? Dr. Sangwa, I guess that should be for you in 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, that is a very good question, and I think we need to to be able to roll out the vaccine. We need to measure the consequences. As he's saying, to me, you know, there have been a discussion about treatment in the first place. They have rejected treatment as been castigated, and it is on vaccination to prevent it. And if we come into Africa or in Cameroon, if we look at our cases, the cases are not mounting, or they are so minimal, and they are advocating for vaccine. I mean, it's a difficult decision to make, but if that is what scientifically can help, people should be vaccinated if the vaccines are safe and effective.
Okay. Thank you. This one from Martial Eteme. Depuis quelques semaines, les États valident progressivement les vaccins contre le COVID-19 proposés par des laboratoires pharmaceutiques comme Moderna ou Pfizer. Quelle est la position africaine sur ces vaccins? Any of the panelists, please. Yes, Doc, you can go in.
Okay, yeah, let me just say so. Yeah, I mean, Africa is in the process of acquiring those vaccines through the COVAX platform. That has looked for funding and has paid some pharmaceutical companies to be able to provide vaccines for Africa. Because the main problem in this vaccine intervention is about unequal access. The current vaccines that are available, the high-income countries, because of their financial prowess, have acquired huge doses of that, and it's within them, and they're saving the populations, while Africa or other LMIC countries are in difficulties financially. But currently there's a vaccine called AstraZeneca. That is a vaccine that is on its way to Africa to be provided by the COVAX platform. And so the negotiations are on the way for Africa to have that vaccine.
Okay, thank you so much for that information. And one last comment from Henry Kwam. Our youth population is ballooning and the highest rate of infection were amongst older people in advanced economies. However, there are no climate and nutritional differences. Thank you so much, Henry, for that contribution. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, I want to say thank you for resisting this far. For those with connection issues, we want to say thank you for actually staying until the end. I will turn now to my panelists, starting with Dr. Constantine for one last word. Doc, your last word, your take-home message for today. COVID-19, then, now, and after. 30 seconds, please.
Yeah, we are aware that the COVID-19 is still in Cameroon. There are still infections, and we need to practice we need to respect the preventive measures in order to be safe. I think there are no two options. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Mudio. One last word from you, 30 seconds, please.
Juste que le Covid court et comme il court, nous devons nous protéger. Il en va de la vie de nos proches et de notre vie.
Ok.
C'est ce que je peux dire.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Mudio. Dr. Kwam, un dernier mot, 30 secondes, s'il vous plaît.
Oui, la crise n'a pas que les répercussions économiques et sociales négatives, il y a aussi des répercussions positives, notamment dans le monde du travail. On va certainement observer dans les années à venir des changements dans le monde du travail. Donc, vivement que les États s'accordent, que les États prennent des mesures coordonnées pour pouvoir faire face à la pandémie et surtout pour renforcer la structure de leurs économies.
Merci beaucoup. Que les États s'accordent pour réunir. Mr. Tazio, 30 seconds, please. Your last word on our topic of discussion this afternoon. Mr. Francis, please, the mic is yours. Okay, I see Mr. Francis appears to be static. Yeah, I guess some connection issues. So dear colleagues, just to say thank you for keeping up till now. And as a reminder, this afternoon we're talking on COVID-19, the then, the now, and the after. And this webinar that we are just about ending is being organized by the COVID-19 task force of the Denis and Lenora Fauretia Foundation. So on behalf of the panelists and the team, just want to say thank you to our panelists for their wonderful discussion, for the wonderful insights. At least now we know that there is a vaccine that is on its way to Africa. And now we equally know that COVID-19 does not only have socioeconomic consequences, negative socioeconomic consequences, it does have a positive side to it. Now we equally know that the government is working tooth and nail to see that majority of its citizens stay healthy and are not being affected by the disease. So thank you so much. And with this, we draw the curtains to end our discussion for this afternoon. Thank you to our health team, thank you to management, and thank you to everyone for being a part of this insightful discussion. Once again, good afternoon and enjoy the rest of your evening. Bye-bye.